Hi there, my name is Micha Jakovac and I'm .NET developer and DevOps engineer. I'm also the author of QAToolKit, which is an open source collection of libraries, tools, and scripts for helping developers, QA engineers, and others to perform quality assurance tasks. In this video, I will show you the next library in the QAToolKit lineup. It's called HttpTesterClient library. This library will give you a simplified code infrastructure to create service tests, or high-level tests or end-to-end tests for your HTTP APIs. Normally, you run these tests against your staging or UAT environments where you have a fully functional HTTP APIs you can call. That means that you have all the infrastructure in place like databases, message brokers, caching, etc. If you go to the QAToolKit GitHub and go under the HttpTesterClient, you can read the documentation. And that will give you a lot more details. But if you like to learn from videos, you can stick with me and I'll show you how it works. So if you go to Visual Studio, I have a .NET 5 command line project open. And now let's ask ourselves, how would we create our high-level service tests? Well, nowadays we can use HttpClient, like in this class here from HttpClient, where we create the HTTP client and specify all the parameters to it. So, for example, we have a base address here. Then we have a request. We create a message request where we specify the method and the API path and all the query parameters we need. Then we add headers, we add content. So in this case, it's a JSON body. So payload is a JSON, and then we execute the request or create a request to our service, and we get back a response message. And in this case, we just print it out to the console. Okay, this looks simple, right? Well, yes and no. This is very simple API endpoint with no authentication, with only one header. We specify only one header. We specify only API version like a query parameter. We can make this a lot more complex. Let's add 10, 20 requests, and you have a lot more code to manage there. Or let's say that we're using self-signed certificates and we want to disable the validation on the HTTP client itself, or we want to use basic authentication or NTLM authentication, or using bearer authentication with JWT tokens. So all those options will add logic and some code to our HTTP client if you use it like this. So now let's look at the HTTP tester client, which is actually a sample I have here from manual.cs. So immediately you see that we use some sort of Fluent API to specify our HTTP request. So we put all the parameters like we would do in the HTTP client in the previous code we saw. But in this case, it's a bit more fluent. You can, I think it's a nicer API to interact with. And the HTTP tester client uses the HTTP client, down below. So it's a wrapper on top of it. So additionally, I promised you that you can get some sort of authentication with this library. So I can use here with basic authentication, right? So we have basic authentication, we have bearer authentication, we also have NTLM authentication. So in all those cases, you specify username and password or a token itself. So let's see, let me see so bearer authentication, you just pass in the access token. How do you get access token? Well, that's a topic for another video, but With basic authentication, this is something you can do and just enter the username and password and just pass it in. This is one thing you can use. There is also with multipart, so you can create a form, a multipart request where you can upload files. So this is also supported. And I mentioned before you can disable validation. So this is something you can do here in the create HTTP request. So you see the parameter. So the second parameter, validate certificate. By default is true, but you can disable it if you want. Okay, so now we created a HTTP request here, and what this does is just creates, just configures the HTTP request. It doesn't actually run it. We run it down below here, right? When we say client.start, and this is something you can also, append at the end here, like this. But of course, then you have to change this how you call it and what you return back. But if we go back with this, we get back a response message, and the QAToolKit HttpTesterClient library adds few extension methods to it. So, for example, when we get a response message back, we would like maybe to check what the what's in the body, what's in the content of the message, of the response message, right? So there are three actually, three extension methods. So one is get response body. This is basically just a shortcut to get to deserialize JSON to the object. Then we have get response body bytes. You get the bytes back, and you get the string back. So those three can be used if you expect different results, and in just a single line you can get that. One additional thing is that you can that we added to the HttpTesterClient object, we added the duration. So we measure how many milliseconds the duration takes, and you can capture that information or display it here. So you can see it in the line below when I write this to the console. So maybe let's just run this quickly. If we go to program, let me just do from manual dot run. So let's just run this. Hit F5, and yeah, so the first line is our milliseconds. So how long the request was executing, and then the result. So it's basically success created and the stuff we passed in. So if I go back here, well, this is all good, right? But because QAToolKit has a Swagger library, so if you watched my earlier videos, you know that we have a Swagger library, and the Swagger library will generate HTTP requests from the Swagger, and that can really make your life easier. If you have a lot of Swaggers, if you have a lot of endpoints, you can really um, benefit from using this building blocks of QAToolKit. So if you go to Swagger, from Swagger file, we see that we do this run. So again, like in previous cases, and the first thing we do is we get a request from Swagger. So this is this method here, and if you watched my previous video, you're familiar with what I'm doing here. So basically we are creating a URL source, passing in the request filters. So we will only filter from the Swagger the requests that contain add new bike in the description or in a summary of a Swagger file, of a Swagger description, right? And then we just pass in, load the URL of the Swagger file, and just return the first result we get. Because it's only one result, we just return the first result, and this is what we get in the request. And then we just do a regular HTTP request, HttpTesterClient instantiation, and we pass the request in the create_HTTP_request method. So previously we had all these Fluent API syntax to add methods, to add a HTTP method, to add query parameters, to add headers, to add JSON body and stuff like that. And with this override here, we can pass in the request, and that will take care of a lot of this, boilerplate we need to have in order to create a request. What we only need to specify is with JSON body, and that is, this is something we defined in this particular case, and it's like this payload we would like to send to this service. And then at the end, we start. So this is an example of previously I said you can append this to the client, and this is how you can do it. Right. So now you see the benefits of combining multiple libraries from QAToolKit to create some sort of abstraction over your Swagger files or HTTP requests. And you might ask yourself now, how do I run these tests? So where should I plug them to really see the results or get something out of it? So you're probably already using NUnit or XUnit or whatever unit testing framework. And for example, I have this another project, and it's a XUnit project, and I have a simple test here. So let's just open it up. As you can see, this is the first, this is the copy from the previous file. I just copied this over. And this is basically a XUnit test. Add new bike success. So again, I'm using a range, so I'm getting a request from Swagger, and then I'm acting on it. So create the same code that's in the from Swagger CS file, and then I do the asserts. So I'm asserting, I get the response code success. If I get the HTTP, if I can show you like this. So if you get a created HTTP code status, if you get, if the request was less than 500 milliseconds, check that, because that's also a good test to do. And yeah, just check if the body was not null. So what we get back was not null. And this is how you can just run and create XUnit tests for you. So let's run this test, and it's done, right? So this is how you can write it. The benefits of using this, of course, you run .NET test and you get the results back, and you can display the results in all those DevOps tools you can use, like Azure DevOps or GitLab or Jenkins or whatever. So you can extract those tests and you really show them in a dashboard where you see which one failed or what worked and what didn't work. So that's really good option. But if you want to write tools yourself and you don't want to use the XUnit, you can still do that. And there is a nice little feature in the QAToolKit HttpTesterClient, which is HttpTesterAsserter, which will actually do this this job for you. So you can pack your tests in a different sort of runtimes, like let's say command line tools or Azure Functions, and you can assert on the results there without XUnit, or you can still use XUnit, but you can have a different experience there. And this is something I will show you in the next video. So I think that's it for this video, and I encourage you to check out the QAToolKit GitHub for documentation, or just visit QAToolKit.io, where is also a links to all of these resources you will need. And if you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, so you will get notification of new videos I will post later this month and next year. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.